The air trembles with heat and silence. Beneath a sun so white it burns through the sky, thousands of men pull ropes thicker than a man's arm, their muscles glistening with dust and sweat. The stone moves slow, impossibly slow, as if the earth itself resists what they are building. The desert groans beneath its weight. And at the heart of this brutal creation, one question lingers like a whisper buried in the sand. What did they truly build here? The pyramids of Giza rise not as tombs, but as enigmas, monumental riddles of limestone and shadow. For centuries, we have called them graves for kings. Yet no mummies were ever found inside the Great Pyramid. No treasures, no inscriptions naming Khufu as its owner. Only narrow passages, strange chambers, and a silence that hums with purpose. It is as if the builders wanted us to search forever, to feel the weight of mystery, not just the weight of stone. Imagine standing there in 2560 BCE, the Nile glitters in the distance, cutting through a land that is more dream than soil. The people of Egypt are alive with fear and reverence. Their lives tied to the divine order of math, balance, truth, the heartbeat of the cosmos. The pharaoh is not a man to them, but a god, the bridge between heaven and earth. When he commands that a mountain of stone be raised toward the sun, no one questions why. Because to them, this is not construction, it is resurrection. And yet, even among the faithful, whispers spread. Some say the gods themselves designed the blueprints, a geometry so precise that its angles align with the stars. Others claim it was a machine, not a monument, built to harness forces beyond understanding. And in the dark, under the desert moon, priests speak of a ritual so secret that even the workers who bleed for it will never know its purpose. In the heart of the pyramid, where no light reaches, strange corridors twist like veins. Some end abruptly, others slope upward, downward, intersecting at impossible angles. The king's chamber lies silent, its granite walls smooth and bare, as though waiting for something or someone. Its ceiling blocks weigh up to 70 tons, yet they were lifted hundreds of feet into the air with no machinery, no pulleys, no steel. How? The question echoes louder than the desert wind. The workers who built this wonder are long dead, but their fingerprints remain literal, prints pressed into the clay of bricks, calloused marks of human endurance. Yet the precision of the pyramid within millimeters of perfection speaks of minds that thought far beyond their time. To align the Great Pyramid with true north within a fraction of a degree would require tools and calculations no ancient civilization was supposed to have. Unless, of course, they did not work alone. There are stories, ones the priests would never tell aloud. They speak of the sound of the gods, a vibration felt, not heard. A resonance that could move stone as water moves in a river. The builders, they say, chanted in unison, their voices merging with the frequency of the earth. And when they reached the right tone, the stones would rise, as if pulled by invisible hands. It sounds impossible, and yet even modern scientists have stood inside the king's chamber and felt it. The walls hum at a specific frequency when struck, amplifying sound until it reverberates through the entire structure. Coincidence or design? Centuries later, travelers like Herodotus would listen to old priests describe the construction, only to leave more confused than before. It was built with machines, they'd say, but none could describe them. Some believe the word machine was never meant, as we understand it. Perhaps they spoke of something spiritual or alive. And then there is the sky. Always the sky. The shafts within the Great Pyramid point with uncanny precision to Rhine's belt, and Sirius, the brightest star of the night. The ancient Egyptians believed Orion was Osiris, god of the afterlife, and Sirius his wife, Isis. The layout of the three pyramids mirrors Orion's 3 stars exactly, not by accident but by devotion. Were they trying to resurrect their pharaoh as Osiris? Or was it something more? An attempt to call the gods back to Earth? Beneath the structure, archaeologists have found caverns and tunnels cut deep into the bedrock. Some lead nowhere. Others echo with unexplained sounds. There are rumors of sealed chambers still undiscovered, blocked by stone that modern technology cannot penetrate. What lies behind them? Gold? bones, or something that was never meant to be disturbed. A story preserved in a crumbling papyrus speaks of a hall of records, a vault hidden beneath the Sphinx, said to contain knowledge from a civilization older than Egypt itself. A civilization that fell long before the Nile carried its first sail. Some say the builders of Giza inherited their blueprints from this forgotten world, the lost age of Atlantis. A myth, perhaps, but when ground-penetrating scans revealed anomalies beneath the Sphinx's paw, rectangular voids that could be chambers, even skeptics grew silent. At night, when the wind moves over the desert, it carries strange sounds. Some swear they hear chanting, deep, rhythmic, unearthly. Scientists dismiss it as the shifting of air, the groan of ancient stone. But those who've spent time there alone say otherwise. They describe the feeling of being watched, as if something ancient still stirs within those walls, patient and aware. There are hieroglyphs showing men with strange rods lifting objects with no ropes. There are carvings of the gods holding what look like energy sources, glowing spheres, serpents of light. To dismiss them as mere symbols is easy. But why? Then, does the pyramid's internal temperature remain constant at 20 degrees Celsius, no matter the burning heat outside? Why do its dimensions encode the curvature of the earth and the distance to the sun? Knowledge we supposedly discovered thousands of years later? Perhaps these were not coincidences. Perhaps they were warnings. One theory, rarely spoken aloud, suggests the pyramids were not tombs, but receivers, colossal instruments built to draw down power from the heavens. The limestone casing once reflected the sun so brightly that they gleamed like beacons. Inside, the granite rich with quartz could have conducted electromagnetic energy, and at the very top, a capstone, now missing, may have been made of gold. Together, they could have formed something like an ancient power plant, absorbing and amplifying energy from the earth itself. Ridiculous! Maybe. But inside the Great Pyramid, no soot marks have ever been found, no sign of torches or fire. Yet the walls were carved with perfect precision. How did they work in complete darkness? Some say they didn't, that the pyramids themselves provided light. And then there's the chamber. No one speaks of the one beneath the Pyramid of Khufu. It was discovered accidentally, a hollow space beneath the bedrock, sealed for over 4,000 years. What they found inside remains classified, hidden behind government restrictions and silence. Those who entered described strange sensations, pressure in the head, dizziness, and the sound of low humming. Officially, it's just a natural cavity. But if that's true, why guard it so fiercely? In the end, the pyramids may not be tombs, temples, or machines. They may be all three, or something entirely beyond our understanding. They could be messages encoded in stone, speaking across time to whoever could decipher them. A legacy left not just for Egypt, but for humanity. A reminder that we are not the first to chase the secrets of creation. As the sun sets behind the Giza plateau, shadows stretch across the desert, long and sharp as blades. The great monuments glow gold for a moment, alive, breathing, eternal. The tourists are gone! The wind quiets. And for a heartbeat, the air hums again. That low, ancient resonance that vibrates deep in the chest. It feels almost like a pulse. That makes a resonance. That vibrates, or something beneath it. Somewhere deep within the pyramid, in a chamber untouched by light, a faint sound stirs like stone, shifting after millennia of stillness. Dust falls from the ceiling. The silence breaks. Perhaps the pyramid has heard its name spoken again. And perhaps it remembers. The sound came again, deep, almost imperceptible, like the sigh of something awakening beneath the stone. Dust swelled in the stale air of the pyramid's lower chamber, catching the beam of a flashlight. "Did you hear that?" whispered Dr. Layla Hassan, her voice trembling despite the heavy stillness pressing on her chest. The others froze. Only the echo of her words replied, soft and hollow, bouncing off granite walls that had not known a voice in 4,000 years. She swallowed hard, her fingers brushing against the engraved floor. The symbols were ancient, older than the dynasties of Egypt, older than recorded time. "It's not hieroglyphic," she murmured. "It's something else." Her assistant, Amir, leaned closer. "We shouldn't be here." They said the chamber was sealed for a reason. But Layla didn't hear him anymore. Her heart was pounding with the rhythm of discovery, the dangerous mix of fear and wonder that had driven explorers since the dawn of history. Above them, on the surface, the desert stretched like a golden ocean, timeless and indifferent. But change was coming. That night, a storm swept over the Giza plateau. Wind howled between the colossal monuments, stirring sand like ghosts rising from their graves. At the same moment, deep underground, the vibrations returned, a low hum, rhythmic and deliberate, pulsing like a heartbeat. Instruments on the surface picked it up. The readings made no sense. Frequency fluctuations, electromagnetic surges, even brief spikes of radiation, as though the pyramid itself was responding to something unseen, something ancient. By dawn, the government had sealed the area. No journalists, no scientists, no explanations, only silence. But silence cannot hold curiosity forever. Word leaked. It always does. Soon, whispers spread across Cairo. The pyramid is alive again. 2 weeks later, in a dimly lit room at the Egyptian Antiquities Authority, an emergency meeting was underway. Layla stood at the center, facing a circle of officials in immaculate suits. The air smelled of old paper and tension. "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaking with frustration. "This isn't just an archaeological site. It's a system, a mechanism built into the stone. Whatever we triggered down there, it wasn't meant to be disturbed." General Farouk leaned forward, his face half hidden in shadow. "Doctor!" he said coldly. "You are a scientist. Speak in facts, not myths." Layla met his gaze. "Fact. The resonance is real. It's increasing every day. Fact. It matches frequencies recorded during major geomagnetic anomalies. The pyramids were designed to react to the Earth itself." The room fell silent. Then, from the corner, a low voice spoke, calm, deliberate. "So, you believe the pyramids were machines?" Layla hesitated. "Not machines as we know them. More like instruments, tools that channel natural energy. And if I'm right, they were built to protect something or someone." Outside, the city roared with life. Car horns, prayers from minarets, the pulse of 20 million souls unaware that beneath the sands, history was beginning to stir. That night, Layla received a message from a name she hadn't seen in years. "Meet me where it all began!" It was signed with a single letter N. She found him waiting near the ruins of Saqqara, a cigarette burning between his fingers, his face lined by years and secrets. Nathan Cole, a British archaeologist turned fugitive, once her mentor, now her ghost. "You shouldn't have come back," she said. "I could say the same for you," he replied, exhaling smoke into the night. "They told me you opened the lower chamber. Do you have any idea what that means?" Layla glared. "You left me with nothing but unanswered questions," he smirked. "And now you have more." He handed her an old parchment, brittle and dark with age. It wasn't Egyptian, not exactly. Symbols swirled across it in curves that seemed to move when she blinked. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "From a tomb under Sinai. Dated long before the first dynasty. It describes a covenant, a pact between the sky gods and the rulers of the Nile. The pyramids weren't tombs. They were seals. You opened one. A gust of wind swept across the desert, cold and sharp. The stars above flickered behind thin clouds. Seals for what? She asked. Nathan looked up, his eyes reflecting the faint red shimmer on the horizon. Not what, who? Before Layla could answer, a distant rumble echoed through the sands, faint but steady. The ground quivered beneath their feet. Both turned toward the pyramids in the distance. For the first time in recorded history, the tip of the Great Pyramid glowed faintly, a soft golden light that pulsed with the rhythm of a heartbeat. By the next morning, Giza was in chaos. The army had surrounded the plateau. Tourists were evacuated. Helicopters hovered like flies over the glowing monument. Global media flooded the airwaves with speculation, natural phenomenon, secret military testing, alien contact, but no one knew the truth. In a hidden tent near the excavation site, Layla examined the readings on her instruments. The energy signature was consistent, almost intelligent. The pyramid was responding. To what? She didn't know. Dr. Hassan, said a voice behind her. It was General Farouk again, flanked by soldiers. You are coming with us? Why? He gestured to the screen. Because whatever you woke up, it's spreading. She followed him outside, across the desert. Smaller tombs and obelisks had begun to vibrate. The air shimmered with heat, though the temperature had dropped, and from the horizon, a low wind carried a smell, metallic, electric, ancient. Farouk's voice dropped to a whisper. Do you believe in curses, doctor? No, she said. Only consequences. Meanwhile, in the dark corridors beneath the pyramid, a secret team of soldiers descended with orders to locate the source of the light. Their flashlights cut through dust and silence. The air grew heavy, thick like oil. Then, a scream. Their radios went dead. When rescue teams arrived, they found nothing but abandoned gear and deep footprints burned into the stone, as if something enormous had pressed against it from within. Cairo trembled under growing panic. Some saw the event as divine, a sign of rebirth. Others called it the end of days. Protesters clashed with soldiers near Tahrir Square. In the chaos, Layla and Nathan slipped away, following a lead buried in an old temple record that spoke of the Chamber of the Black Sun. It was said to lie beneath the pyramid, deeper than any man had dug. A place where pharaohs once communed with gods, or what they believed to be gods. Hours later, with a single oil lamp and fading courage, they found the entrance hidden beneath a cracked stone slab. The passage was narrow, suffocating, filled with a scent of dust and something faintly sweet, like incense or decay. Symbols glowed faintly on the walls as they passed, their light pulsing to the rhythm of their footsteps. Nathan's voice echoed. They say the pharaohs didn't build these. They just found them. Layla ran her hand along the wall. Found them? He nodded. Inherited them from those who came before. The ones they called the Shining Ones. At last, they reached a door, a perfect slab of black basalt, carved with circles intersecting like stars. At its center was a handprint, carved with exquisite detail. Layla hesitated, then placed her hand over it. The stone was cold at first, then warm. Then it moved. The door slid open, with a hiss of air that smelled of rain. Impossible in the desert. Inside was a vast chamber, wider than any cathedral, filled with stone pillars that seemed to rise into darkness. At the center stood a sarcophagus of obsidian, smooth as glass. Nathan approached it slowly. It's empty, he said, leaning over. But it wasn't. Something shimmered at the bottom, a faint shape, fluid and light, pulsing like the reflection of the sun on water. Then it shifted, stretching upward, forming a vague outline, human but not. The air grew heavy. A voice, ancient and layered, filled the chamber. Why? Have you broken the seal? Layla stumbled backward, her lamp flickering. Nathan froze, eyes wide. Who are you? He whispered. The light within the sarcophagus pulsed. We were not gods. We were guardians. The temperature dropped. Sand trickled from the ceiling. Guardians of what? Layla asked, her voice trembling. Of balance. Of the sky's order. When your kind turned against the light, we buried the knowledge to protect the world. The light flickered violently now, the chamber trembling. Nathan grabbed Layla's arm. We need to go. But she didn't move. What happens if the seal is broken? She demanded. A silence followed, long, dreadful. Then the voice whispered, almost mournful. Then the others will awaken. A sudden shockwave hurled them backward. The lamp shattered. Darkness swallowed everything. When Layla opened her eyes, Nathan was gone. Only his notebook remained, scorched at the edges. Above ground, the great pyramid's glow intensified, spreading through the sand like veins of light. Across the world, seismographs spiked. The earth groaned, and somewhere deep below, in the ancient black chamber, the sarcophagus cracked open. The hum that had started as a whisper became a roar. The world would never be the same again. The desert had stopped breathing. The storm that had raged across Giza was gone now, leaving behind an eerie calm to calm. The pyramids no longer glowed, yet something in the air remained electric, heavy with the memory of what had stirred. Soldiers stood guard in uneasy silence, and the world above continued its fevered speculation. But beneath that stillness, something was moving, unseen, unheard, unstoppable. Dr. Layla Hassan woke to the sound of her own breath echoing in the darkness. Her body ached, her mind fractured by flashes of the chamber, of Nathan's voice, of the glowing figure that had spoken from the sarcophagus. She blinked, realizing she was no longer underground. The scent of antiseptic stung her nose. White walls. A hospital. No, too quiet. The hum of generators. The sound of boots outside the door. She sat up, her pulse quickening. The window was sealed. The door was locked. Someone had moved her. The door opened with a hiss. General Farouk entered, his uniform immaculate, his face unreadable. Behind him stood two men in suits, their badges unmarked. You're awake, Farouk said calmly. Good! We need answers. Layla's voice cracked. Where's Nathan? He didn't respond. You found his notebook, didn't you? She said, her tone rising. Tell me what you did to him. Farouk looked at her, his eyes hard as obsidian. Dr. Hassan, your friend was found near the chamber entrance. He didn't make it. Layla's breath caught. That's not possible. He was right behind me. Enough. Farouk set the notebook on the table. Explain what you saw down there. Layla stared at the charred edges of the book. The words on the first page were still visible. The seal was never meant to be broken. She closed her eyes. It wasn't a tomb, she whispered. It was a prison. Farouk leaned closer. For what? Layla looked up at him, her voice trembling. For the ones who called themselves guardians? They claimed they were here to protect us. But what if that was the lie? That night, Layla was moved again, this time under escort. Her hands were bound, her eyes covered. She could hear the echo of boots, the clank of steel doors. When the blindfold came off, she found herself in a cavernous hangar filled with machines, monitors, and a faint mechanical hum. At the far end, a massive structure rose, a metallic replica of the pyramid's interior. The hum was the same frequency she'd heard inside Giza. Farouk watched from a distance as scientists in lab coats monitored the readings. We've been testing the resonance pattern you described, he said. Your discovery has changed everything? He nodded. If the pyramids are energy collectors or whatever you believe, then this technology could power nations. Imagine what Egypt could become. Her voice sharpened. You don't understand. That energy wasn't meant to be used. It's alive! Farouk's mouth tightened. You sound like a priest, not a scientist. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Farouk said quietly, You can help us, Doctor, or you can disappear like the others who tried to stop progress. Layla looked away, her throat burning with fury and helplessness. Outside, Cairo burned with unrest. News of the awakening had split the nation in two. Some hailed it as divine proof, a return of the old gods. Others saw it as blasphemy, a curse unleashed by arrogant hands. The streets were alive with chants and gunfire as belief and fear clashed beneath the same sky. And through it all, the pyramids loomed, silent witnesses to another era's chaos reborn. Days passed in the lab. Layla was forced to work under surveillance, translating symbols and recalculating resonance models. But something gnawed at her, the fragments of what the light being had said. When your kind turned against the light, we buried the knowledge. What if the light it spoke of wasn't divine, but a weapon? Late one night, she found a hidden note in Nathan's burned notebook. The paper was thin, nearly fused to the binding. Scrawled in his frantic handwriting were the words. Her heart pounded. Everything she'd believed, that the pyramids were monuments of divine alignment, instruments of harmony, began to crumble. The Great Pyramid wasn't channeling energy to preserve balance. It was containing it. The next day, an alarm tore through the facility. Red lights flashed. Engineers shouted, "Monitors flickering with static." Layla rushed to the viewing platform. The replica pyramid was vibrating violently, its metallic panels glowing faintly gold. "Shut it down!" she yelled. Farouk barked orders, but it was too late. The structure pulsed once, twice, then went silent. For a moment, everything froze. Then the power across the base cut out. Darkness swallowed them. When the emergency lights flickered on, Layla saw something impossible. Faint. Geometric symbols glowing across the metal. The same markings from the ancient chamber. The pyramid replica was alive. From its base, a low hum began to build again, deeper, heavier, pulling at the air like gravity itself. "General," one of the scientists whispered, "the energy signature matches Giza." Farouk turned to Layla, his voice barely audible. "What have we done?" That night, Layla dreamed of the desert, but it wasn't silent anymore. The sand was shifting, trembling with each pulse of the Great Pyramid. Above it, the stars moved subtly, unnaturally rearranging themselves into patterns she didn't recognize. In her dream, the voice returned. "You opened what should have stayed buried. The sky will remember." She woke in cold sweat. By dawn, reports flooded in from across Egypt. Strange electromagnetic fields. Faint vibrations under the ground. Even sightings of lights hovering above ancient temples. But the most terrifying came from beneath the pyramids. The sealed chambers were opening, one by one. Layla demanded to see the sight again. Farouk resisted, but the readings left him no choice. Together, they returned to Giza. Layla stepped closer, her hand trembling. "It's expanding," she whispered. Layla's eyes widened. "It's escaping!" Farouk's command post was chaos. Satellites showed strange activity across the Sahara, sudden magnetic storms, compasses spinning wildly. Farouk ordered a blackout, forbidding anyone from contacting the outside world. But it was already too late. Leaks had begun. A rogue broadcast, transmitted from a pirate signal, spread across the internet. The footage showed the glowing pyramid, the military blockade, and unmistakably, the shimmering dust rising into the sky. Across the world, panic ignited. In the shadows of Cairo, Layla found herself hunted by both her government and those who believed she had unleashed divine wrath. She hid in the catacombs beneath the old city, guided by her remaining allies, scholars, ex-soldiers, and one unexpected figure, a man who looked like Nathan, but he wasn't. His eyes were different, ancient, luminous. "You shouldn't have followed the echo," he said softly. Layla backed away. "Who are you?" His lips curved faintly. "You know who I am?" "You freed me." Her breath caught. "That's not possible." He stepped closer, the shadows shifting with him. "You saw what they did to us, trapped between life and light. You called us gods once. We only wanted to finish what we began." Layla's voice broke. "You killed him. You took his form." He tilted his head. "He offered it. To live again through the pattern. Don't mourn him." "Mourn what comes next?" Outside, thunder rolled across a cloudless sky. Layla whispered, "What are you planning?" His voice deepened, resonant. "The world forgot the covenant. But the stars remember. When the alignment comes again, the gate will open." The gate, he smiled. and the air seemed to tremble around him. You called it a pyramid. We called it a bridge. The ground shuddered beneath them. The lights flickered. Somewhere in the distance, the Great Pyramid began to glow again, brighter this time, the light spilling into the sky like a second dawn. Layla fell to her knees, tears stinging her eyes, as realization crashed over her. The pyramids weren't monuments of death or machines of life. They were anchors, holding something vast and ancient in place. And now, that anchor was breaking. The wind howled through the ruins as the false Nathan whispered one last word, soft, almost tender, before vanishing into dust. Awakening! Then the desert roared, a sound that seemed to rise from the bones of the earth itself, as if all of history had shifted, all at once. The wind howled across the plateau, carrying with it a scent of old dust and buried dreams. The sun, once the divine eye that blessed their creation, now seemed like a cruel overseer, glaring down at what Egypt had become a kingdom, trembling under the weight of its own glory. The great pyramids, once symbols of divine order, now cast shadows long and dark over a land divided by greed, blood, and ambition. Pharaoh Khafra stood upon the balcony of his palace, overlooking the Nile, the river that had once sung songs of abundance now flowed like a slow. His reflection shimmered on the golden water. But it was not the face of a god-king he saw, it was that of a man haunted. The whispers had grown louder, that the pyramids were not tombs of kings but prisons of power, their chambers alive with something ancient and unfathomable. He turned to the high priest, Iruka, who knelt before him. The people grow restless, Iruka said softly. They speak of curses and of betrayal, that the gods no longer walk with us. Khafra's eyes narrowed. Then we will remind them who built the heavens on earth. We will remind them who commands the sun. Yet even as he said it, doubt coiled in his chest like a serpent. In the workshops below the plateau, hundreds of slaves and artisans toiled under the crack of whips. The heat was suffocating, the air thick with limestone dust. Among them moved a quiet man named Amenet, a scholar once favored by the court, now condemned for heresy. His crime, speaking aloud a forbidden belief, that the pyramids were not homes for the dead but vessels for the living soul of Egypt itself. A machine of resonance, built to bind time. He carved in silence, eyes glancing often toward the horizon, where the pyramids gleamed like eternal fire. Every strike of his chisel was a prayer, not to the gods above, but to the truth buried beneath. At night, under the stars, he would meet with others and secret workers, scribes and priests disillusioned by the crown. They gathered in the hollow beneath the Sphinx, its face worn by sand and time, its gaze eternally fixed on the eastern horizon. There, among flickering torches, they whispered of rebellion, not of war, but of revelation. The pharaoh builds his tomb to house his immortality, Amenet said, his voice low but fervent. But what if the pyramids are not meant to preserve one man, but to preserve us, all our knowledge, our essence, our harmony? The group fell silent. The idea was treasonous. Yet in their silence, something stirred hope, fragile and dangerous. Meanwhile, the royal architects prepared the final ceiling of Khufu's Great Pyramid. The air was thick with incense and anxiety. Deep within the grand gallery, torchlight trembled against polished limestone. Hieroglyphs glimmered like trapped stars on the walls. The chief architect Meripta ran his fingers over the final stone block, the one that would seal the king's chamber for eternity. This is not just stone, he whispered. It is memory. Khafra watched in silence. Around him, priests chanted hymns to Ra and Osiris, voices echoing through the chamber like the pulse of the earth. Yet, as the last stone slid into place, a low vibration hummed through the pyramid, faint but undeniable. The torches flickered. Dust rose from the seams of the walls. Khafra's heart pounded. What is this sound? He demanded. Meripta hesitated. It is the breath of the structure, my lord. The resonance of the chambers aligning with the stars, but there was fear in his eyes, fear that something greater had awakened. Outside, the people began to speak of omens. A blood-red moon rose over the desert. The Nile's flood came late. Crops withered in the heat. Some said it was the god's punishment for disturbing the balance between heaven and earth. And within the palace, betrayal brewed. Queen Nefer, Khafre's consort, had grown distant. Her eyes, once soft as dusk, now held a glimmer of something colder. She had seen too much. The sacrifices, the slaves dying by the thousands, the priests twisting divine will into tyranny. And in the quiet of her chamber, she met with Iru, the high priest who had once served the throne but now served something older, something beneath the stone. The pharaoh believes he commands the gods, Iruka murmured, his voice like silk and poison. But the gods have grown weary. The balance must be restored. Nefria looked toward the horizon, where the pyramids glowed under starlight. And how does one dethrone a god? Iruka smiled faintly, by reminding him that even gods bleed. Days later, during the festival of Ra Khafre, appeared before his people adorned in gold and lapis. He raised his arms to the sky as drums thundered and dancers moved like flames. Yet among the cheering crowd, a silence spread like a ripple. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Amunet, the scholar Turndrabel, now gaunt and pale, his eyes burning with conviction. He fell to his knees before the pharaoh and cried out, "You have built monuments to yourself while your people starve! The pyramids are not the voice of the gods. They are their graves." Gasps filled the air. Gods seized him, but Khafre raised a hand. The crowd waited. "You speak treason?" Khafre said calmly. "I speak truth," Amunet replied. "And truth does not die with kings." Khafre's expression hardened, but for the briefest moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Doubt, sorrow, recognition. Then he turned away. "Seal his fate in the sands," he ordered. "Let the desert claim his truth." Amunet was dragged beyond the city walls, where the desert stretched infinite and cruel. They buried him to his shoulders, leaving him to the vultures and the sun. But as the last shovel of sand hit the ground, he whispered through cracked lips, "The stones remember. They will remember long after the crowns have turned to dust." That night, a storm swept across the desert, fierce and unnatural. Lightning danced over the pyramids, striking their tips with blinding fury. The sound was deafening, like the roar of the gods themselves. Inside the Great Pyramid, something shifted, a faint echo of energy pulsing through its corridors. The air vibrated as though the structure itself had come alive. When dawn came, the storm was gone, but Khafre's palace lay in ruins. Nefer had vanished, and Iruka stood in the temple courtyard, bathed in morning light, whispering prayers to forces that predated Yvon Ra. Weeks turned to months. The kingdom fractured. Famine spread. The once mighty Nile shrank into a thin ribbon of despair. Khafre, broken and paranoid, confined himself to the upper chambers of his pyramid, surrounded by his most loyal guards. He spoke to no one. At night, he claimed to hear voices in the stone, the murmurs of his ancestors, the hum of eternal power. But the more he listened, the more his mind began to unravel. He saw visions of the pyramids crumbling, the desert swallowing all. And one night, he descended into the king's chamber alone. The torches sputtered as he entered, their flames bending as if pushed by unseen breath. He approached the sarcophagus and placed his hands upon it. The hum returned, deep, resonant, ancient. The walls trembled. "Show me," he whispered. "Show me the truth of what we have built." A beam of moonlight slipped through the narrow shaft above, striking the sarcophagus lid. For a heartbeat, the chamber filled with light, and in it, Khafre saw a vision. The pyramids rising not from his will, but from something beyond time. They were not monuments of power, but anchors devices meant to bind an ancient force within the earth. A force now stirring. His scream echoed through the corridors. Outside, the rebellion ignited. Led by Iruka and Nefer, the people stormed the royal compounds. Flames devoured the banners of Ra. The statues of kings toppled one by one. "End the age of gods!" cried Nefer, her face streaked with ash. Let Egypt belong to its people once more! The night sky glowed red with fire. The pyramids loomed over the chaos, their surfaces gleaming as if reflecting the fury of the heavens. But deep within, Kafir stood before the sarcophagus, trembling. He pressed his palms to the stone and whispered, "Forgive me." Then the earth shuddered. A rumble rolled across the desert like thunder, the sand trembling as though the world itself had taken breath. The rebellion froze. The sky darkened. From the heart of the Great Pyramid, a beam of golden light shot upward into the clouds, pure, blinding, eternal. And in that moment, every man and woman, loyalist or rebel, felt the same thing. Terror. And the unshakable knowledge that the pyramids were far more than they ever imagined. When the light faded, silence fell. The fires went out. The wind ceased. And on the horizon, the pyramids stood unchanged, serene, silent, watching. But in the stillness, one thing was certain. Egypt would never be the same again. Because beneath the stone, something had awakened. The ground beneath history had shifted. And the gods, it seemed, were not finished with Egypt yet. The air was heavy, thick with silence after the storm. The pyramids stood unbroken, their golden caps glinting under a bruised dawn sky. Yet Egypt had changed. The rebellion's fires were extinguished, but so was the light of its old faith. In the cities, people whispered that the gods had answered, but none could agree whether it was mercy or wrath. Khafra was gone. Some said the light consumed him. Others swore he still walked within the pyramid's corridors, neither living nor dead, whispering to the stone. Whatever truth remained, his throne was empty, and his empire trembled like a wounded lion. Queen Nefoya stood upon the palace steps, her face streaked with soot and grief. Behind her, Aruka, the high priest turned prophet, gazed toward the horizon, toward the 3 towering pyramids that now hummed faintly like hearts beating beneath the desert. "What have we done?" she whispered. "What was always meant to be," Aruka replied. "We have broken the chain." But as the morning wind swept through the ruins, a sound rolled across the sands, low, thunderous, alive. The ground trembled. The pyramids began to pulse again, veins of golden light tracing their edges like molten fire. The desert breathed, and far below, in chambers long sealed, something moved. The pyramids of Giza nightfall. The stars burned cold and distant. Beneath them, the rebellion gathered one final time at the edge of the necropolis. Torches flickered. Armor clinked. Faces were hard and hollowed, men and women who had fought gods and kings alike and found no peace in victory. A scout stumbled forward, breathless. The ground beneath the Great Pyramids. It's splitting open. They ran to see it. Where the base of Khufu's pyramid met the desert floor, a fracture had formed, a glowing, spiraling wound in the sand. Light poured from it, cold and unnatural, painting the faces of those who dared to look. Iruka fell to his knees. "It's the Chamber of Balance," he murmured. "The heart of the structure?" The rebels stared at him, fear clawing at their throats. "You said this was the will of the gods," one soldier hissed. "Did you know this would happen?" "I knew." Iruka's voice trembled. "I knew we built something greater than kings, but not that it could wake." The crack widened. The air grew hot. A deep, resonant hum filled the night, the same tone that had echoed in Khafre's final moments. Sand erupted upward, as if the desert itself was exhaling. From the light emerged figures, not flesh, not shadow. They shimmered like glass, translucent and ancient, their forms shifting between human and divine. Their eyes burned with the color of the sun. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "The gods!" Nefoyer whispered. "They live within the stone." The first of the beings stepped forward, tall, radiant, its voice not spoken but felt, vibrating through bone and air alike. "You sought eternity," it said, "and built prisons of pride." The crowd fell to their knees, trembling. Nefoyer stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest. "We meant to honor you!" she cried. to preserve your will. The light shifted, pulsing in anger. You sought to command what cannot be commanded. You turned devotion into empire and truth into monument. The desert roared. The wind screamed through the dunes. The pyramids flared, beams of light connecting their peaks, forming a triangle that pierced the heavens. Iruka stumbled backward, realization dawning on his pale face. They were never tombs, he gasped. They were seals. The words hung in the air like a curse. The gods, or whatever forces had once been bound beneath the pyramids, had not been resting. They had been imprisoned, and now, freed by human arrogance, they turned their gaze upon the world once again. The sky turned red. The sands began to quake. From the glowing fracture, sandstorms rose like living beasts, coiling upward, tearing through tents and soldiers alike. Cries filled the air. "Run!" Neferia shouted, grabbing Iruka's arm. "We have to close it!" Before Neferia could answer, a wave of light surged from the fissure, knocking them both to the ground. The sound that followed was not thunder. It was like 1,000 voices weeping at once. In that blinding moment, she saw them visions cascading like fire. Pharaohs kneeling before stars, priests carving codes into stone, slaves singing hymns of freedom. She saw time folding, past and future colliding, Egypt rising and falling, endlessly. Then, silence. When she awoke, the world was ash and dawn light. The pyramid still stood, but the light had vanished. Around her lay the ruins of the rebellion, armor twisted, banners burnt, the sand blackened to glass. Iruka was gone. Neferia rose unsteadily. Her once regal robes were torn, her hands blistered. She stumbled toward the pyramid's base, where the fracture had been. It was now sealed, smooth, unbroken, as if it had never existed. And there, carved freshly into the stone, were words she did not recognize. Lines of symbols no scribe had ever seen. They shimmered faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. She fell to her knees and wept. Days passed. The Nile returned to its banks. The storms ceased. The people crept back to the cities, hollow-eyed and quiet. No one spoke of the rebellion anymore. No one dared. But rumors spread that a queen walked the desert at night, seeking redemption among the ruins. That sometimes, when the moon was full, the pyramids glowed faintly, as if remembering something sacred and sorrowful. And in secret, a new faith began to grow, not in kings or gods, but in balance. In the idea that power without humility devours itself, and that knowledge, once unleashed, cannot be caged again. Many centuries later, the desert lay still, timeless. Sand covered the ruins of the old palace. The names of Kafir and Nefer had faded from stone, their stories buried beneath the endless tide of history. A caravan approached the Giza plateau, scholars, travelers, seekers of forgotten truth. Among them, a young historian named Menes dismounted his camel, shading his eyes against the morning sun. The pyramids rose before him, vast, eternal, indifferent. He felt small beneath them. As he approached the Great Pyramid, his guide whispered, "They say, no one knows what lies beneath." Some chambers were never mapped. Menes smiled faintly. Maybe that's for the best. But curiosity was a hunger too strong, too silent. He stepped closer, running his hand along the weathered stone, and felt a faint vibration, like the echo of a heartbeat. He frowned, pressed his ear to the wall. A whisper. Soft. Ancient. Too faint. To understand, yet undeniably there. He stepped back, breath shallow. "Did you hear that?" The guide shook his head. "Hear what?" Menes looked again at the pyramid, the sunlight glinting along its edges. For an instant, he thought he saw movement, light flickering deep within. Then it was gone. He turned to leave, but something stopped him. A mark, carved at the base of the stone, half buried in sand. Strange symbols, unlike any known hieroglyphs. He brushed away the dust. They pulsed faintly, just for a heartbeat, before fading again. And in that fleeting shimmer, Menes understood this was not an ending, but a message. A memory locked in stone. As the sun sank behind the horizon, the desert turned to gold. The pyramids glowed in silence, ancient and knowing. The wind carried a low hum, the same resonance that had once shaken the world. It was the sound of history breathing, of God's dreaming, of truth enduring. Because the pyramids were never monuments of death. They were mirrors, reflecting what humanity had always been. Creators and destroyers. Seekers and sinners, forever trapped between the divine and the damned. And as night fell, the stars appeared countless, eternal, indifferent witnesses to all that had been and all that would come. Beneath them, Egypt slept, and deep within the stone, the heart of the world still pulsed, waiting for the day when it would be remembered again. The desert returned to silence. Centuries passed like wind-blown sand, erasing footsteps, swallowing cities, smoothing away the scars of what once was. The storm had ended, or perhaps it had merely moved inward, buried beneath the quiet bones of time. The pyramids remained, unmoved, unbroken. Their shadows stretched across dynasties, outlasting the names of kings, the fall of empires, and the silence of gods. What once hummed with light now shimmered only in memory. Yet every grain of sand that clung to their base held something unseen, an echo of the ancient hum. Faint as a dying heartbeat, but alive. The world above changed. The Nile carved new paths. The stars shifted slightly in their courses, and yet, night after night, the pyramids caught the same moonlight they always had, pale, endless, indifferent. In the age of Alexander, when the world once more turned its gaze to Egypt, conquerors stood before the Great Pyramid and felt something they could not name. Alexander himself, young and hungry for divinity, had walked barefoot through the desert to stand at its base. His generals recorded that he placed his hand upon the stone and closed his eyes for nearly an hour. When he opened them again, he said only one thing. "It is older than the world I rule." No one understood what he meant. But that night, under the stars, Alexander dreamed of fire in the sky and sand that whispered. He dreamed of gods trapped in geometry, of bridges between heaven and earth. When he awoke, he claimed to have seen his destiny in the stone, to become eternal, like them. He marched east soon after, chasing immortality. He never returned. In the centuries that followed, the pyramids watched empires rise and fall. They saw Rome's legions darken the horizon, their banners fluttering like blood in the sun. They heard prayers in Latin, then in Arabic, then in the 1,000 nameless tongues of travelers who came seeking answers. But they gave none. The Great Pyramid, scarred and stripped of its golden crown, stood like a giant with its heart carved out. Its chambers lay quiet, or so men believed. Inside, dust gathered on walls, etched with forgotten symbols. Yet when torchlight touched the stone, faint reflections still shimmered, like breath behind glass. Scholars and thieves crawled through its veins, measuring, looting, worshipping, doubting. They called it a tomb, a monument, a mystery. But none of their words ever fit, because deep within, beyond the known corridors, beyond where any map dared to end, the pulse still lingered. Slow, patient, waiting. In the medieval centuries, Bedouin storytellers spun legends around campfires. They spoke of the city beneath the sand, where the old gods slept, their hearts beating in rhythm with the stars. They told of a queen who defied death and wandered the dunes, her eyes reflecting the light of a vanished sun. Children listened wide-eyed, clutching their shawls as the wind moaned through the desert. Some said that if you placed your ear to the pyramid's side at night, you could still hear her whisper, a woman's voice speaking in a language older than any scribe could record. The wise men laughed, but none dared to test it. And so the legend lived on. When Napoleon's armies arrived, they too were humbled. His soldiers, fierce, sunburned, hungry for conquest, stood before the pyramids and felt the same weight that had silenced kings before them. Napoleon, restless and curious, walked alone into the Grand Gallery. He carried only a lantern and a journal. Hours later, he stumbled out pale and trembling. "What did you see?" his aide demanded. Napoleon looked at him with hollow eyes. "Nothing," he said. "And everything?" he ordered. The account sealed. That night, his men reported strange lights flickering atop the pyramids, faint, bluish glows that lasted until dawn. They never appeared again. By the time of modern explorers with their compasses, drills, and cameras, the pyramids had become a monument to the unknowable. The world had mapped nearly every continent, charted the heavens, dissected the atom. Yet the purpose of these ancient giants remained unsolved. Tombs! The evidence said no. Observatories? Temples? Energy machines? Each theory built another layer of belief, just as the ancients had stacked stone upon stone. But what if both were true? What if neither were? Dr. Layla Hassan, centuries after Nefere's shadow had vanished, stood where countless others had stood before her. At the base of the Great Pyramid, the wind brushing sand across her boots. The sun burned low. Drones buzzed overhead. Her team packed up their gear, weary after months of excavation, but she lingered. Her fingers traced the stone, not the surface tourists touched, but deeper, older cuts revealed beneath layers of restoration. She closed her eyes and felt a hum, so faint she might have imagined it. Her breath caught. For a moment, the world fell away. She saw flashes, not images, but feelings, fire, reverence, sorrow, awe, voices whispering across centuries. A queen's trembling prayer. A scribe's hand trembling as he sealed the chamber. The sound of something ancient sighing beneath the earth. Then, silence. She opened her eyes to find the desert unchanged, but something inside her wasn't. That night, as she sat beneath the stars, Layla looked at the constellation Orion, the same pattern the ancient builders had aligned their pyramids to. 3 points of light, steady and eternal. Khufu, she whispered to the night. What were you reaching for? The wind carried no answer. Only the shifting of sand, the sigh of the desert, and the faintest tremor beneath her feet, like a sleeping giant turning in its rest. She smiled softly, sadly. Maybe the truth had never been meant to be solved. Maybe it was meant to be felt, an inheritance of wonder passed from one beating heart to the next. Because the pyramids were not just stone. They were memory. A mirror of everything humanity had ever been. Builders, dreamers, conquerors, seekers. They were the last conversation between man and eternity. 1,000 years later, when the sun expands and the earth begins to burn, long after all cities have fallen and even the sea has turned to dust, the pyramids will still stand. Their peaks will pierce the thinning sky. Their hearts will remain buried in silence. And perhaps, in that final dawn, the hum will return one last time, echoing faintly through the bones of a dying world. A reminder that once, humanity reached for forever, and, for a brief moment, almost touched it. Beneath the endless desert sky, the pyramids shimmer faintly in the moonlight. The wind sings through their corridors like the breath of time itself. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it. The heartbeat of stone. The echo of all who came before. The whisper that binds past and future. A whisper that asks, what price do we pay for reaching too high? And what becomes of us when the stars finally answer back? The end!